Welcome back to Careers and Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Laura. Today's guest is someone whose name and leadership will be familiar to anyone in the emergency management world, Rich Serino. Rich spent more than 40 years in public service, starting out as one of the city of Boston's very first EMTs and paramedics, and ultimately being appointed by President Obama, confirmed by the Senate as the eighth deputy administrator of FEMA. Over the course of his career, Rich responded to more than 60 national disasters, briefed the president and vice president in the Situation Room, led FEMA's operations during Superstorm Sandy, and he was on the scene at the Boston Marathon bombings. As FEMA's chief operating officer, Rich fundamentally transformed how FEMA operates by putting survivors at the center, championing programs like FEMA Corps, and creating a culture that encouraged innovation, accountability, and even pride in wearing the FEMA shirt. He also launched initiatives like FEMA Think Tank, giving citizens a direct voice to leadership, and he played a critical role in mentoring the next generation of emergency managers. Since leaving FEMA, Rich has continued shaping the field as a distinguished visiting and now senior fellow at Harvard, and through his work with New York City, MIT's Risk Lab, and the National Academies. In this episode, we'll talk about his journey from Boston EMS to the halls of Washington, the lessons he's learned from leading through crisis, and his vision for the future of emergency management. Let's get into it. Rich, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Oh, it's thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, absolutely. First things first, we got to start with coffee. Do you have your cup with you? And which one did you choose? Because I know you have a lot of favorites.
It's
Ah, City of Boston, EMS.
City of Boston EMS. Yeah, I have many. I have FEMA, the White House. I have many Boston ones, but
Of course. Yeah, difficult choice this morning, I'm sure. Now, the choice of as to what's in your cup. What is that
oh,
today?
Duncan. Two coffee. Duncan is actually was a problem when I was in Washington, D.C. There
What's
weren't many
that?
Duncans.
Ah, yeah, you had a Starbucks.
Starbucks right at FEMA. So
It's
it
a
was a
big
tough,
shift.
tough 5 years. Yeah,
Must have been the hardest part of the job, I'm sure.
by far.
Well, let's get right into it. So, I want to start with maybe the hardest question of all. When you were little itty bitty rich growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a little itty bitty rich, it's funny you say that because I was actually, those who know me know I'm not a little guy, I'm 6'5", but when I was born many years ago, I was only under 2 pounds. My arms and
Oh,
legs were this
wow.
big.
Oh, my
Back
goodness.
then, that was a big deal to survive. And they says if he survives, he will be a very big guy. So I was little bitty rich at one point.
That's
When I was a
right.
little bit bigger. Um, Actually, I wasn't sure. I actually started volunteering in the Boston Ambulance Squad when I was a little bit under 18, even though it was supposed to be 18.
We won't tell anyone.
Don't tell me. So in public service in some way, shape, or form has always been part of what I wanted to do. Always, some way to help people, whether I was in high school and
Sure.
in, various jobs in high school and before high school was always like trying to find a way to help people.
Yeah. Well, your story of resilience started really early.
When I was, with my uncle and cousins and driving up the highway and there was an accident in front of us and, didn't know what to do when the accident and there were
Mm,
three people very seriously injured and standing there
yeah.
not knowing what to do. I said at that point, the 14-year-old me said, I never want to be
Wow.
in a position where I'm not going to help someone again. So
And there you have it. Yeah, a lifetime of leadership from there. Well, you were, as shown by your cup, you were with Boston EMS, City of Boston EMS, for quite a long time. You were one of the first paramedics, right, with the
yeah.
City of Boston, and then of course rose eventually to lead for decades. But looking back, how did we kind of know a little bit of your origin story, but how did those early years teach you about, whether it was leadership, crisis response, all of those things?
Well, I think, the early times and, not only
Mhm.
was the first paramedic in 1970 something, and also first
Something.
paramedic even before that, the first EMT.
Mm.
And that was, and that really shaped me because the system at that point, I was the 24th employee they hired. When I
Wow.
left as chief, we had over 500 employees.
Wow.
So a tremendous growth over the years. And, I was
Yeah.
fortunate to be part of that. And one of the
Yeah.
things that taught me early on is, you deal with people.
Hmm.
Obviously, as an EMT and a paramedic, you're dealing with people firsthand. As somebody told somebody many years ago, why? And I says, well, there's nothing like a high of saving somebody's life, truly saving somebody's life,
Hmm.
and taking that opportunity on a different level. And one of the things, especially at EMS, as I rose through the ranks, is remembering that that's about people and remembering that
Absolutely.
how important it is to be there for people and to take care of them all throughout whatever they're going through. And
Hmm.
remembering that the compassion that comes with it, the empathy, that if you don't have that as an EMT and a paramedic taking care of somebody one on one, the patients, the family, they'll pick that up right away.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, to
Yeah.
not just as an individual, but how do you do that? And it actually, I was worried as I moved up in ranks over the years, not to lose that, and really,
Sure.
really working hard at that. Both
Hmm.
whether I was, the shift commander or, the superintendent, superintendent chief, or eventually chief, is keeping that and making sure that, you're connecting with the patients, the community, as well as the staff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important that you mentioned that because like you said, you're dealing with people on the worst, probably the worst day of their lives,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody, plans for you to come to their house when they
Right.
call
They
someone.
don't want you there. I mean, they
You know,
want you there,
they
but
want you there, but
they
they don't
didn't want
want
you
you there.
there.
And when you walk into
Exactly.
somebody's house, that's something that, you know, you see people as they truly are.
Truly.
People
Yeah.
put trust in you just by the fact that you walked in their home.
Hmm.
Sometimes by the walking in the home with the uniform, and how people will let you, as an EMT and a paramedic, they'll tell you things they don't even tell sometimes their family members.
Yeah.
They will
Yeah.
let you touch them. You know, Law enforcement, you really don't want them to touch you, you know.
Right.
So as a, paramedic and MT, it's people will tell you things and they allow you to touch them. They allow you to take off their clothes. It's a trust that's
It's a
instantaneous, but you
huge
can lose it in a
responsibility.
second. And
Hmm.
so maintaining that trust, and that's something that to me was important all the way to being the deputy administrative FEMA, is the trust that
Yeah.
people have in you as well.
Well, let's get into that. So many years, right, in Boston, did you ever in a million years anticipate a call from the White House?
Never, never. I wasn't looking for a job. I didn't
Right.
apply for a job. I was quite happy where I was because I was there
Hmm.
30, just shy of 37 years. In Boston, wasn't looking to go anywhere. And, getting a call from the White House was not something that I had not, wasn't on my
Not on
bingo
your
card.
bingo card.
Not at all, never. Um,
I imagine, what was that like?
it was really, really strange. I was actually on vacation. They called, they left a message at home. My son got the message and he was telling me, you know,
Hey, Dad.
Dad, someone left a message here. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
so, I says, oh, so I thought, they said it was from the White House. And I was like, yeah, sure. Um,
Now I would think we would think it was a scammer, right? Like a
Oh,
spam
I
call.
thought it was. I actually what I thought it was somebody at work playing a joke on me, and like,
Right.
but they were, a few steps ahead because they used the 202 area code as opposed to a Boston area code of
Sure.
617. So they're
Yeah.
really working at this prank. You know, Lo and behold, it was not a prank. They had, they said, "Can you come down on that Thursday?" I says, "I can't. My goddaughter's being confirmed. And I'm the sponsor, and
Right.
can't miss it." And they wish the card's a big deal to her. The Cardinals, wow. And long pause. And they said, "Excuse me." So I repeat the story. Um,
I'm busy.
yeah. And so they said, "Okay, how about next Monday?" I said, "Geez, I can't do next Monday. Monday happens to be, the Boston Marathon. And, on the, was on the organizing committee, the medical incident
Hmm.
commander, cannot miss
Yeah.
that. Can't reschedule it." They said, "Excuse me." So I repeated again. And he was not real happy. And then time goes by, and before he comes back, and next time I says, "Hey, I'm going to be in DC for a conference like in a couple of weeks. Will that work?" Long pause, and he says, "Okay." So I actually call my son, who's living in New York, and I tell him, and I realize, Dad, not once, but twice you told the White House where to go. And it's like,
Well, and so you did say yes, of course. You had a massive budget mission. Just the scope of it all was huge. What was it like to step into, from where you had been into the role of, FEMA's deputy administrator?
well, it was a big transition, but it's
Hmm.
also understanding the mission.
Yeah.
and it's people first. And I think that was the number one thing is maintaining that. We also came in at a time that was post Katrina.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I had to go through is the deputy administrator was a Senate confirmation process.
Yep. It's
Um,
intense.
it is intense. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
No.
But I did make it through. But
Hmm.
one of the things is, and they prepped you for the hearing. And
Hmm.
one thing
Yep.
they didn't prep me for was one of the questions they asked me was, "What do you want your legacy to be?" or something like that. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Geez, I really hadn't thought of that." And
Yeah.
I relayed a story that happened when I was going through the process beforehand. And
Sure.
those you've always been at FEMA, and there's a courtyard at FEMA,
Hmm.
and the hotel. And during the summer, they used to have, and I don't know if they still do, like on a cookout. You can go buy a burger, or a hot dog. So I go there, and I'm going to get a burger, and I get burger, and I go, and all the tables are full. So there's one table with one young gentleman, probably in his early 20s, sitting there.
Yeah.
I said, "Mind if I join you?" He says, "Yeah." So we start talking. I asked him if he works at FEMA, and he tells me, "Yeah,
Hmm.
he works there." And I said, "Oh, tell me a little bit about it." He says, "Well, 2 years as a contractor, and while I was there as a contractor, I was able, in his words, scam a FEMA shirt." I said, "Oh, good." And then he
Oh,
says,
good.
"Then I got hired as a full-time employee," and he says, "But," I said, "So you wearing the FEMA shirt legit now?" He goes, "Well, no." I said, I don't wear it because people are telling me, we shouldn't be wearing the FEMA shirt."
Mm,
And this again, post Katrina, probably almost, well, 4 years, 3 or 4 years at that point. And so people weren't wearing the FEMA shirt. And
mm.
so we got talking, and so he says, "Well, what are you doing?" I says, "Well, I'm, going through a process. I may come to, oh, you're going, you're being interviewed." He says, "Sort of, kind of." He said,
Yeah. Something
"What?"
like that.
Something like that. He says, "What's the job?" So I tell him, and all the color drains out of his face. It was sort of funny. "No, it's okay." But I relayed that story as during my hearing, actually, and said, "I want people to be proud to wear the FEMA shirt again. I'm not
Mm,
going to mandate it by a memo, not going to
sure.
mandate it by, this is a new policy, um, but proud to wear the FEMA shirt." So both Craig Fugate,
Yeah.
myself were wearing the FEMA shirt, and wanted people to be proud to wear it over a period of time. And it sort of became a thing that, and fast forward like 5 years after I left,
Yeah.
and somebody was going down an escalator at the Pentagon station. It's a really long escalators.
It is a very
I
long
was
one.
going
Yes.
down, they were going up,
Yep.
and hey, hey, boss, still wearing the FEMA shirt. So it's a matter of, I think, how did that happen? Was not by accident for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I think what you're talking about is a real cultural shift, right? It's not about the shirt.
No,
It's
not at all.
more, it's way deeper than that,
Yeah,
right?
it's to be proud. It's to, as we say, one of the classes I teach at Harvard is people go in the basement when they're,
Mm.
want to, they can't think straight. They're just all, they curl up like
Yeah.
this. And it's like the organization was a tough time after Katrina,
Mm.
and giving people something to be proud of. And, and you mentioned the budget. The key is having, as I say, some wicked smart people, you know,
Yeah.
always hire people smarter than you. For me, that's really easy. And there were
Yeah.
some wicked smart people already at FEMA. One of the things is, FEMA has a very large budget and
It
billions and,
does.
tens of billions of dollars, depending on the year, and with the DRF, Disaster Relief Fund, as well as the operating budget. And it was
Hmm.
understanding that and also putting into context for people and realizing that the story, we weren't telling stories about the people.
Mm.
Sometimes you just send up numbers as
Yeah.
opposed to telling the stories about the people that are affected. And I think that was one big shift. And also diving
Absolutely.
into the budget, which I wouldn't say it was my strong point. I certainly don't have an MBA by a long shot, but it was
Right.
realized, is just asking people questions,
Mm.
not to intimidate them, not to make them feel bad, but asking questions about the budget. What's this used for? Where are we going? What we're doing? Which
Right.
then led to us doing, FEMA stat, which was after CommStat that, had come in New York City. And I was shocked the federal government was using any stat process or analytics or data analytics at that
Mm.
time, which, again, was a little surprising, but it was
Yeah.
just putting that in place. And again, we would have the stat process that people would come into MO1 or at the National Response Coordination and people from within FEMA, and not as I got to, and I says, this is not to make anybody upset, but I want to understand, and we want to have them go through the process. And to me, that was starting to get people to think that we're not there to get you, we're there just to make
Sure.
it better. And it was
Yeah.
change that culture as well. And we talked about coffee earlier. As much as it was painful to have Starbucks, I did drink an awful lot of Starbucks. Because that's you learn a lot, by standing
Just,
in
you mean
line,
just so that at FEMA there was a Starbucks basically that was part of the building.
right,
And
in
so
the
that was like a
lobby,
very convenient place for FEMA staff to go.
right. And it'd be funny.
Maybe many times in the day.
Always many times in the day. If I was outside the building, I'd always
Sure.
go in through Starbucks
Through the
and
Starbucks.
yeah,
Hmm.
almost always purposely, and obviously when
Yeah.
you're taking the metro in the morning, you go through Starbucks.
Yep.
And
Sure.
that's where you get some of the best information, of what people really
Absolutely.
think, because people will talk over coffee. I had an
Oh,
open
yeah.
door policy, but the open door on the eighth floor, you had to get through like three doors,
There are some obstacles. Yeah.
many obstacles. So yes, I had an open door, but you had to get
Yeah.
through like three or four locked doors, a couple of
Sure.
secretaries, administrative assistants. So yes, open door policy, but that's where between Starbucks and just
Yeah.
people say walk around, but walk around. At FEMA, you had to walk around not just the building, because at the time we were in 13 buildings in DC,
That's true. Yeah.
and then many regions. So that was part of it too, is going to visit all the regions and listen to people. And when I did that,
Hmm.
I'd ask people two questions. We'd have like a short all hands meeting, depending on the size of the region or the buildings in DC, uh,
Right.
or not the whole building, but whether it's just recovery or whatever, and sort of tell them the mission and vision where we wanted to go. But then I'd ask people two questions. Why did you come to work to FEMA?
Hmm.
And if you could fix, change, or improve one thing, not five, not 10.
What would
I
it
wouldn't
be?
I wouldn't get the answers in the meeting, because I'd literally then walk around to everybody's cubicle, their office. If we're in a distribution center, one of the centers, if we're at a JFO in one of the, wherever they are,
Hmm.
and sit there and I talked to close to 3,500 employees in the first 3 months and asked them those two questions. And the
Yeah.
first question was not about, yeah, I wanted to know, but as a reminder for them why they came to work to FEMA. And I'd say about
Hmm.
85% of people's aversion of I wanted to help people. And
Yeah.
when you're sitting behind a desk or you're not dealing with people face to face all the time, it's easy to forget that. So yes, I
Yeah.
wanted to know, but more to remind them. And I think
Yeah.
that was really key. And
Yeah.
and we kept track of that. And the other 15% were brutally honest, says I didn't even know what it was. It was a good paying job, so I took it. It's like, thanks for being honest. Uh, but the vast majority of people were not that. Um,
Hmm.
and the other question, if you're in people's space and
Hmm.
you tell them, you ask them a question, they'll tell you the answer, in their space. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a little guy. So I would literally sit on the desk or sit in the chair. And heaven forbid if they had a Yankees, thing on the wall or something. But it was always a conversation starter, whatever their pictures they had on the
Sure.
wall, wherever
Yeah.
they are, to just sort of say, and go from there. And people will tell you. I mean, and by some of the things that people told me, it's literally saved us tens of millions of dollars within the first
Yeah.
3 months. If you just
Yeah.
listen and then take action, that builds trust as well.
Exactly. And I was just going to say, you have to have that trust to even have those conversations.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, the other thing that really stands out, if we're talking about, the legacy of Rich Serino, is the phrase "whole of community," or whole community, I guess, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, but it's funny because we didn't come up with the name. It was a concept that as we were talking,
Right.
is bringing people together.
Sure.
And at one point, once we sort of said this is the framework to bring, federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, which we really didn't talk to cities that much. We talked to states
Hmm.
at the time.
Hmm.
We didn't really include tribes, and we certainly did that. Craig was a huge proponent, and we did that, and I was a huge proponent of cities, and as we were able to build that. And then it's like bringing together the nonprofit community.
Yeah.
We didn't have written agreements with everybody at the time, and
Yeah.
bringing together the private sector. It's like how do we bring in all these groups of people, the faith-based community, and so the whole community, and the most important part, obviously, is the public. And that's one
Hmm.
term that has stayed. The big question was, is it whole community or whole of community? And some of the administrative folks had a discussion about that. I says, I talk too fast anyway, so it doesn't matter whether it's whole community, whole of community. I don't know what I'm saying, so don't worry about it.
Right.
As we were able to, and that concept obviously is stuck, and I think it's an important
Hmm.
one, that it's again
Yep.
about bringing people together and
Yeah.
listening and then taking action. What do they need?
Yeah. During your time at FEMA, you responded to, I think, it was more than 60 disasters. Are there moments for you that stand out more than others, whether it was, Hurricane Sandy, which was actually my first deployment, Joplin, the Boston Marathon bombings? What would you say, or how would you say those moments really shaped you as a leader?
I think they almost every deployment changed me as a leader in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
And I remember in the tornadoes, Joplin, and remember just a few weeks before was the week that we had, well, 2 days, we had 523 tornadoes,
Mm. Hmm.
Tuscaloosa, and many other
Yep.
small towns. In visiting those the day after, and going up to what was left of a house. And this image sticks with me to today,
Hmm.
that there was nothing's left of the house, just one half of a wall. And there's a woman holding a baby, obviously her granddaughter, and her daughter was there, standing there, and just start to go up to talk to them. And there's a flag in the distance, is what was a mobile home next to it.
Hmm.
And come to find out, the patriarch of the family, the grandfather, had passed away in the
Yeah.
storm.
Yeah.
Go up and say, we don't need any help. There are people that need more help than us. The resilience of people on their worst day to see
Yeah.
help somebody else really sticks out to me. And that was just that
Yeah.
one instance, but in pretty much every disaster, it's like, the
Hmm.
resilience of neighbor helping neighbor. And
Hmm.
don't underestimate the power that is. And don't underestimate the power of hope, that
Yeah.
just the presence is of being there gave them hope. And we could see
Yeah.
that. Obviously, we were providing a lot of services. All the things that FEMA does that nobody realizes, to help people after recovery, after a disaster and during the recovery, short term and long term.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the most important things is, yes, hope isn't a strategy, but giving people hope is something that I think is really important, that people miss, that FEMA, people don't understand how much hope when, whether it's one of the reservists, full-time employees that are out, that just seeing somebody with the FEMA shirt gives people hope. And sometimes
Yeah.
their worst day.
Yeah, absolutely. Another part of your job in that role, right, was at times briefing the president. And I think most of us, we see the Situation Room, right, on TV or, in movies. You've actually been in the Situation Room, right? Like sharing information at the highest level. Um, can you take us inside what that was like for you? I mean, I imagine it was just as surreal as getting that call from the White House itself,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah. And thankfully, the first time I went in the Situation Room, I was not the primary person. The
Right.
couple of
You had
chairs
a
down.
little, could ease into it a little
We'll
bit.
ease into it. But one of the first times was briefing was, there's the president, you're right next to the
Hmm.
president. And it was during Hurricane Bonnie and the Gulf oil spill.
Mm.
And, you're in the room briefing the president. And, thankfully, there was Bill Carwile, who was director response, a legend,
Yep.
one of the
Yeah.
best emergency managers around. And, and Peter Neffinger, who was at the time the
Hmm.
vice commandant of the Coast Guard and
Yep.
the deputy for the oil spill. And Peter's a longtime friend too.
Yeah.
So, it was good to have friends in the room. Uh,
Sure.
but but briefing the president, and then, we on that briefing particularly, we ended up doing it in shorter amount of time. We, a couple of mistakes that nobody knew we made. Like he was supposed to say, turn on the PowerPoint. Nobody told me he's supposed to tell him to turn it on. So we did the whole briefing without the PowerPoint on the
Oops.
screen. We had it on paper.
But you made it through.
Yeah, made it through. And then they were like, you guys can brief anytime. As Peter Neffinger says, thanks. That meant we ended up briefing a lot, which was, again, every time I went into the White House, where the situation was just walking in, when I came out, I pinched myself saying, what am
Like,
I
is this
doing here?
real?
I'm just a
Yeah.
medic from Dorchester, out of Boston. It's like, what am I doing here? Um, but it was, to me, a bit surreal, but it was also a huge honor. But I'm also realized that I'm, representing, you know, everybody at FEMA,
Hmm.
and, hopefully having a voice for the survivors as well when we can.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility. Under your leadership, FEMA also launched the FEMA Corps. So that is or was a big unit of folks. I say kids, but I think you get
I
to a
still
certain
say kids, and
age.
every time I say kids,
They're
I
not
got corrected,
kids.
so I say members.
Right. They were 18 to about 20,
Year olds.
18 to
Yeah,
24.
absolutely. It was a concept that I had actually after you mentioned the Joplin tornadoes. There was
Hmm.
like 115,000 volunteers that were managed by volunteers, and that stuck with me. The volunteers,
Yeah.
volunteers, and then
Yeah, yeah.
shortly thereafter, in 2011, went down to Ballstrip, Texas, after wildfires, and went to one of the disaster recovery centers. In the after people there, in a separate part, there were a couple of, I was going to say kids, but a couple of AmeriCorps
Members.
that did in the forestry stuff, and they were like helping with the forestry. So I just sat down and started talking with them
Yeah.
about why they do this and what. And they were like 20-year-old kids, okay, members, and it was interesting. And it was I didn't really talked to a lot of people about it, and then we've been talking a little about doing something, and then had an
Hmm.
opportunity at the White House to come to a meeting. Like I remember the date, November 22nd. That come in and are you free to go to a meeting? Would you like to go to a meeting this evening? This is 3 o'clock
Hmm.
in the afternoon. This evening at the White House. It's like it's not a question usually. It's like they're not putting it in question. It's like yes.
Right.
And it was in the Roosevelt room when they brought together about 13 or 14 undersecretaries from all over government.
Okay.
And you're supposed to come with a new idea. So I went to this meeting. In the first half hour, people are talking. The president's not in the room. The president's chief of staff and the head of
Hmm.
the and so the people are talking, and they're talking the politics today. Interesting, you know,
Sure.
not my cup of tea, but they were interesting. And so so somebody in the row behind said, you're supposed to come with a good idea. So when I said, well, I have this idea, FEMA Corps, 24-year-olds, a year of service to the country,
Hmm.
you pay them, minimal wage, not even minimum wage. You pay them,
Hmm.
a stipend, and if they complete the year,
Sure.
you give them money. About I think it was 80, $7,500 towards
Hmm.
education, pay off loans
Sure.
that go to school. And they were, and by the way, I think we can save a lot of money doing this too.
Yeah, right.
I said, gave a figure, sort of back a napkin figure, and they says, "Oh, interesting." So about 15 minutes later, the president walks into the room. He walks around the table and he comes to where I am. He says, "Oh, hi, Rich. How are you? Good to see you. What are you doing here? I only see you when bad things happen." It's like, "Well," and the head of O&B says, like, give me a nod, like, tell him. So I tell
Tell
him,
him the idea. Yeah.
like the elevator speech version, like in about 4 or 5 minutes. And he says, I
Sure.
like that idea of FEMA Corps. So, we do that. And at the end of the meeting, he says, I really like that idea of FEMA Corps. He says, let's walk over to the Oval Office and get a picture. So as he comes up to me, so tell me more about this idea of FEMA Corps.
Hmm.
So thankfully, I had, talked about it in the past. And I'm sort of telling him what I see and I don't want to say, I'm not making up details, but I sort of a vision. And so he says, oh, I like this. So we get the picture and he leaves. And so his staff says, where's the white paper on this? I says, it was 2011. I said, sir, we've had, at this point, I think it was $15 billion as, the staff.
Yeah.
We've had many times we haven't had a chance to write a white paper on this.
Sure. Yeah.
So I go back the next day, hey, Craig. Craig said, boss, like it? Yeah, okay. Secretary, a regular meeting we had, it's like secretary
Hmm.
said, yeah, Rich, whatever you want, yeah, sure. But so now we had to do it. And thankfully, you know, a couple of people at FEMA, I'll give their names because they did a lot. Bob Fenton and Brad Cosman, sort of went with this, and a huge team of folks really made that happen.
Yeah.
And less than a year later, we
FEMA
had
Corps was born.
FEMA Corps was born then, and by Hurricane Sandy, we had 480 FEMA Corps members on the ground, 240 in New York, 240 in New Jersey. That really, really helped um, save us. And,
Yeah.
many other things obviously happened there too. But they also were fertile ground to do new things, like everything from
Hmm.
getting, hey, can we do iPads? Can you register people to do this? So
Yeah.
about, there were about 30 things that FEMA Corps members came up during Hurricane Sandy that helped transform FEMA going forward.
Registering people for assistance on iPads, you
On
mentioned, like,
iPads, they said,
yeah,
hey, do you have iPads? And I remember we had just ordered some, and I knew they were still in the building at headquarters, and they did. And we
yeah,
sent them out. And we didn't get them all out, but they just started registering people. We like
amazing.
in their
Yeah, just
homes.
truly like meeting people where they are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible too, just to think of, 9 months from, conception to
Yeah.
delivery of the
It's
program. And
it's a
that's
matter
in
of
government, that's no small feat.
it isn't, but it's also when you want to do something and you
You
have
just do
people
it.
and you just show the leadership, but it's also
Hmm.
understanding who the players are,
Sure.
the Domestic Policy Council, the White House, getting, Congress, even though we didn't need because we weren't using funding, we were just doing it to agency agreement, but getting them on board as much as
Yeah.
you want to get people on board that believe in it, but also people who could stop it. So sort of
Yeah.
literally drew out who are all the people we had to touch
Yep.
and get this working. And obviously working with AmeriCorps and keep,
Yeah.
in the process with that.
Yeah, it's all part of it. You mentioned as part of the concept of whole of community, um, the idea of giving the public a voice, bringing the public into the conversation. Why was that so important to you? Because you also launched FEMA Think Tank, which that was a big part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's also, the think tanks were something that I, did at FEMA. Again, people says you can't do that. People are going to ask you tough questions. It's like, well, if I don't know the answer,
Okay.
you don't know.
Yeah, right.
And try to have people who will know the answer. There's no way I'm gonna. It goes back to what I said earlier. Hire people smarter than you, and get
Hmm.
people in the room smarter than you. So I think it's a matter
Hmm.
of, listening to what people say and bringing people along. And as you start to get people um, to trust you, and
Yeah.
you start to do that, people will listen. And if you listen to them and then take action is key.
Yeah. Something else we've talked about before is you hired and mentored, as you mentioned, countless young leaders, whether it was FEMA Corps or many through the Presidential Management Fellows or PMF program
Yeah.
as it's known. When you think of the next generation of emergency managers or just next generation of professionals, right, in general, what do you look for?
Um, People who have passion.
Yeah.
Whether I was hiring, when I was hiring new EMTs,
Yeah.
we can train you to be an EMT, you to be a paramedic. You can be trained to be an emergency manager.
Hmm.
You need the passion. I would always look for passion. People who have passion, you can usually tell pretty quickly. I don't care what you have passion about. Some people have
Yeah.
passion, about a dog. Some people have passion about, baseball. Some people have
Hmm.
passion about emergency management. Um, and hiring people for passion. And that's really hard sometimes. And it was very hard at FEMA because,
Yeah.
there's all the rules and how you have to hire people. But you mentioned the PMFs, the Presidential Management Fellows. Um, Usually you can spot a leader, or you
Mm-hmm.
can spot somebody who has that passion pretty
Hmm.
easily if you look and listen to what they have to say.
Hmm.
And when you do that, I always tell people also know how to write really well.
Yeah.
I'll admit it, I hate to write. So I always, but having that passion and the PMFs that we hired initially, there were two at FEMA when we got there.
Yeah.
They were doing filing. And it's like, well, this is a waste of some smart
Yeah.
people.
Some
So
talent.
we
Yeah.
bring those, and we were able to bring in, sometimes kicking and screaming the first year, about 10, not the PMF, some of the staff at FEMA. But once they saw how great they were, we went from 10 to 25 to 52 to 52.
Yeah.
And a lot of those PMFs now,
Are in
SCS,
leadership
SCS at
roles.
FEMA,
Yeah,
they're running FEMA,
absolutely.
literally running.
Hmm.
So I think that's one thing is, we have to look at the pipeline, if you will. We have to look at the folks to, mentor, um, give them give them space, but
Hmm.
also learn from them. Like I
Yeah.
learned more from PMFs and from FEMA Corps, I think, than a lot of folks.
Yeah. Um, I want to talk a little bit about gratitude. Um, I know moments of gratitude can come sometimes in really unexpected ways, whether it's the president in the Situation Room or, at the meeting you mentioned talking about FEMA Corps. Sometimes it's from a survivor when you're in the field. But looking back, what moment of recognition or gratitude has stayed with you the most?
I think one is, many years ago, when I was a paramedic and then a shift commander,
Hmm.
we had, unfortunately, there was at the time a lot of violence in Boston.
Hmm.
Thankfully, it's not anymore.
Hmm.
And I had, responded to a shooting to take care of this young gentleman who was shot and unfortunately murdered. And took him to the hospital, and his mother was there and just talked to her briefly afterwards, and she had watched what was happening because it was right outside their home. And fast forward less than a year later, and responded to the similar area, and her other son
Hmm.
was shot and murdered.
Oh gosh.
Um, and had again gone to the hospital, and I honestly didn't put two and two together at the time.
Mm,
Focused on taking care of him, trying to save him. And
yeah.
when we were there, and she remembered that, and I had been involved in Boston with a group of um, parents of murdered children, mostly all mothers. I don't, they said parents, it was essentially mothers, and had
Hmm.
worked with them and trying to look at violence and how we can abate violence, and a number of things I could go on, but how to do
Yeah,
that.
right.
And they
Yeah.
had asked, they had a little storefront of this parents of, and I would stop by when I was a shift commander, once a month or so at their meetings, just sort of say hi. And this woman says, I never forgot how you treated me there in the worst possible days of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I never forgot. And so I did just very quietly some work with them for years. And then one night she says, oh, make sure you come by this night, one of their meetings. I says, okay. And we go in, and they had like these bottles of like Fanta orange, and big bottle of 2 liter bottles of Coke, and some Doritos and stuff. And they says, we just want to thank you. We want to give you a certificate. And it was one of those things like from Kmart, certificate appreciation, um, and from the parents of murdered children. And to me, that it it's the thing that, I got the awards some behind me, Chief of the Year, EMS, and tons
Yeah.
from FEMA and other places. But that's the one that means the most to me by far,
Yeah.
by far.
They put that together for you.
Yeah, they hit the, come
Yeah.
in that night. There was a bunch of other mothers, not parents,
It's
but
amazing.
of and did a lot of work with them over the years. But that one stuck with me. But it also stuck with me that the actions that you take, people notice. People
Yeah.
notice what you do. People notice what you say, and they'll come up to you. People still come up to me from my time as a
Hmm.
medic in Boston. People, hey, I remember you. And the same thing at FEMA. People remember what
Yeah.
you do, remember what you say,
Yeah.
how you treat them. Uh,
And I think just going back to what we talked about earlier too, I mean, you're dealing with people, whether it's survivors on their worst day or the staff on, re in really traumatic incidents, and it affects them too. And you have the power, a lot of power, a lot of responsibility as a leader to be the bright spot for people when they need it the most.
as a leader, is you have to, you know, be empathetic. I think is probably the
Hmm.
most important. Many
Hmm.
characteristics of leaders. I think having empathy is probably one of the most important.
Biggest. Hmm.
Is understanding what people are going through, what they've been through. Uh, but it's also, being in their shoes.
Hmm.
And I believe that as a leader, presence is a mission as well. Yes, you need
Yeah.
to be in the national response coordinator. So yes, you
Yeah.
need to be in the situation room, but you also need to be present. You need to be
Right.
present on site,
Yeah.
whether it's in my other job, mass casualty incidents, or individuals, or, Joplin or Sandy, um, you know, American Samoa after tsunami, on and on
Hmm.
and on. But being present, I think,
Yeah.
is as
And
much
how
an
you
asset
carry
as
yourself in
well.
that presence. Yeah, absolutely. You've also said that crisis is an opportunity. Um, how do you see the current moment as a chance to reshape FEMA, the field of emergency management? What's your vision for how the field needs to evolve?
I think one of the things now is we need to come together as emergency
Hmm.
managers. There's, many different organizations, many different parts that are unfortunately, a lot are online and saying, "Wait, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. This is the way to do it." A lot of great ideas, but
Yeah.
how do we come together? I think that
Hmm.
now more than ever is, are we going to agree on everything? No, we're
No.
never going to agree on everything, and that's fine. We shouldn't agree on everything.
Right.
But at the same time, let's at least have conversation is the way we can come together. And having conversation is actually not just talking, actually listening to others.
Hmm.
And then saying, "Oh, well, I didn't see that point of view," and
Yeah.
come together because there are so many emergency managers across the country that are uh, wonderful people, want to do the right thing.
Hmm.
Very few don't want to do the right thing,
Hmm.
um, and strongly opinionated, which is great because we need
Yeah.
strongly opinionated people.
Yeah.
But it's also time to listen to others too. And I think, crisis and opportunity, people say that all the time. I say it all the time. But it's also, now is a time for responsibility. Is how do we
Hmm.
make FEMA better? Can I predict what it's going to be? No, I don't think anybody
Hmm.
can. But we have an opportunity to at least have a discussion and shape it and realize that, yes, this group is focused here. This group is focused here, as they should be. But there's a
Hmm.
bigger goal that we all need to come together on.
Yeah. I think that's applicable in a lot more ways than just emergency management, just
Oh,
the idea
absolutely.
of listening and sharing perspectives and keeping an open mind. Um, Rich, you've spoken about the power of hope. Um, how do you see hope as a part of leadership, whether it's after a disaster or the future of our world, right? Like why does hope matter so much?
I think it matters because the future of the world, future of emergency management is you as leaders, and leaders don't have to be by deputy administrator of FEMA,
By
chief of
title.
this.
Hmm.
It's not the title.
Yeah.
Some of the best leaders are people who do the job day in and day out because, leaders are who people will follow, and usually people will follow people who give them hope and give them opportunities. And I think that's the biggest thing. You give people hope, giving people opportunities to move forward.
Hmm.
Till the old saying, you have two ears to listen, one mouth to talk. So you should listen twice as much.
That's right.
And I think take that opportunity um, that if people will truly listen, not just wait for their time to talk, but truly listen, that we can go forward. This is a tough time for emergency managers, absolutely,
Hmm.
but we can also make it better. We all know it can be better. It should be better, and we will
Yeah.
make it better. There's no doubt in my mind we will make it better. Is it going to be rough? Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. But we can do it.
Yeah.
We will
We can
do
do
it.
it together. That's
Yep.
right. I love it. Thank you so much, Rich. I so enjoyed this, and I'm thrilled to have had this conversation with you. Where can people go to learn more about the future of the field? What do you recommend people follow?
Um, oh, there's so many different places that people can follow. I think. I mean, there's the organizations, NEMA, IAM, BCEM, there's those. There's the opportunity for people to listen to podcasts such as this. There's
There you go.
opportunities that I think just listening, taking the
Yeah.
opportunity to hear other points of view. And then, I'll go back in time and say, you can actually pick up a phone and do something unusual, maybe text somebody or call them and speak to them.
Have a
Because
conversation,
have a conversation
maybe over coffee.
over coffee, over coffee. I say adult beverage occasionally, but coffee is good too.
That too.
Yeah.
Rich, I have one last thing to share with you. I always say you can take, I guess the person, for me, you can take the girl out of FEMA. You can't take FEMA out of the girl. And I do think that I want to show that you left your legacy. This is one of the shirts that I scammed out of FEMA,
Awesome.
my first deployment. But I am proud still to dust the FEMA shirt off from the
Awesome.
closet and throw it on. So thank you so much for leaving behind such a rich legacy, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap on this episode of Careers and Coffee Talk. Big thanks to our guest today for pouring out so many great insights. And hey, thanks to you for hanging out with us. If this episode gave you a little jolt of inspiration or made your day a little bit more brewed and balanced, be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming up next. Got a minute? Drop me a 5-star review. It's basically the podcast equivalent of buying me a fancy oat milk latte. Quick disclaimer though, the views expressed in this episode are personal and do not reflect those of any organization. This conversation is not an endorsement of any company, product, or service. It's just real talk over virtual coffee, okay? So until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and keep chasing the career that makes you feel the most alive. Catch you next time.